Absolutely.
Thank you kindly, Andrea. I think we said that we just do a very brief intro so you get to know us all a little bit better. So as Andrea says, I'm James Morris. I'm the CEO of Dentsu Creative across Europe, Middle East and Africa. We work with brands the likes of Coca-Cola, Gucci, Kraft Heinz, Spotify and Orange across the region. I also chair our Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Council at Dentsu. And on a personal level, I'm married and the proud father of 2 daughters.
Amazing. Thanks, James. My name is Kian, and I am the founder of The People. We are a next-gen marketing consultancy, and we are powered by a community of 150 young activists, creators, and change makers. Our mission is to unleash the creative potential of young people. And I'm really excited to join the panel today to talk about doing things differently.
I was saying in the green room, it's great to be here with friends. So yeah, really happy to see both James and Kian. And so hi everyone, I'm Scott. I use he, they pronouns, and originally from Hawaii. Been with Dentsu for almost 6 years now. And yeah, do a lot of work with James in the DEI space and of course across environmental. And been working on a really exciting project with Kian and James recently that we're going to show you in a few minutes. But we sort of wanted to set the context because doing things differently is something that actually Kian and I are coming back to after setting up something that we like to call the Code, which ideated way back in 2016. And so for us, it was a way of connecting with young people. Yes, from a development perspective, because we realized that the people that we wanted to welcome into our business didn't necessarily have the skills that we needed. Schools didn't necessarily set them up in terms of digital skills that we thought they required. But then also we wanted to make sure that we opened our doors to everyone and anyone that we thought could then come and change us and make us better. So the Code, clever acronym, I don't know if Kian was the one that thought about this, but you can let me know, stands for Creativity, Opportunity, Diversity, and Empowerment. So we worked with 13 official partner schools across the UK, and all in areas of low social mobility. So really looking at how can we go out and engage to make long-term change. So yes, working with schools, but also bring the young people into our business at the end of it. The Code's been on a bit of a journey since then, and we'll get onto that in a moment. But yeah, I wanted to sort of hand the mic back to Kian and just sort of help me set the context of where the Code came from.
Yes, Scott, I think you talked about the beginnings, and for me, it's incredible to see what you and the team have built from an initial idea to scaling it. And I guess I'll start with a personal anecdote. So I had no idea what marketing, advertising, or media was. And at the time, I was actually looking for a new role. And one of my friends was like, come to this coding event. And I was like, I can't be bothered. And I did go, even though it was on a Saturday. And little did I know, Dentsu, a company I'd never heard of, were recruiting for a new agency. And it was that exposure in the very early beginnings that led to the inspiration for the Code. And as you said, Scott, it initially was founded on this question of how can we attract new talent and become more representative. And I think the solution of going to them rather than waiting for talent to come to you was very innovative at the time. But I'm even more excited now because the Code has become a platform for young people to create what they want to see in the world. So as you said, that transition from talent to empowerment beyond recruitment is amazing.
And I would add to that, empowerment, yes, but activism, really. I see the Code now as a accelerator program for the generation of change makers and activists, people who are out there demanding more from business, demanding more from brands. And the fact that we get to be a facilitator or a conduit between the amazing brands that James mentioned that we have the honor and privilege of representing, and the young people who consume these brands, yes, but also know that brands have such a significant and powerful influence in the world, and that we as an industry have to take our responsibility very seriously and say, if we can change minds, if we can change hearts, if we can change consumer behavior, we need to use that power wisely. And that's really what I think is so exciting for us as dentsu, but also through this program. But we've sort of floated a bit about what we're working on, which is called The Code Presents. But if the team could help us out and just play the trailer for everyone watching, but we can show you instead of just tell you.
Brands were listening to more of the voice of young people. I've had so much more partnerships with like brands and people, and as I said, these brands that I'm collaborating with, they're all cruelty free.
It's about turning the negative and not allowing it to stay negative, and how you kind of change it and push it towards a positive.
For me, it's got to have a real, true global approach, but also making sure that young people are brought and put at the centre of that conversation.
It's very important and crucial that our voices are heard now in order to maybe save the world tomorrow.
Great. And I promise you that was just a snippet, because I had the pleasure of actually being in the room, and every single sentence that was said was just mad. Like, you had to think of it and think about it. And I guess watching that again, the question I had for you, James, is you've been involved in award-winning work. Why was it important to you to amplify the voices of young people with The Code Presents?
It's a great question, Kian. I mean, I think watching that trailer back again, and I think, and hearing you both speak about it so honestly and authentically, and obviously you were crucial to the whole setup of the code. I think, firstly, it's such an incredible initiative, and I think, you know, for somebody who's only 2 years into their career at dentsu, to actually have this already concepted and conceived and up and running was a real asset for us. I mean, I think in terms of why it's important, I mean, it's vital, you know, as I said in that thing, that not only do young people have a voice in critical issues like Ad Net Zero, to a business like ours, it's vital that we give access to young people from all backgrounds, you know, of all different ages, because, you know, we need to be able to speak to understand consumers, understand people's behaviors, and we need people from, you know, young people in particular, but I think from all backgrounds to truly understand the audiences that we're trying to target for those different brands. And I think creativity, as you will know, comes in all different shapes and sizes, and so should the team that we build at dentsu. So for me, it was an incredible asset to join an organization that's built something so big. And I think, you know, the sort of brands that have got involved with the program, the scale of the numbers of students from across all of the UK, and we're rolling that out, you know, as we speak internationally. You know, the program's going from strength to strength, which is a credit to you both.
I mean, always a team win, as you both know. But yeah, you're right, James. I mean, I think we're at about 14,000 young people that we supported just in the UK. And back in 2019, we took this program and we scaled it globally as well. So we had that incredible investment from Dentsu Group, said, this is incredible. We want to take this to Americas. We want to move it across EMEA and build it into APAC, so that it's something that's consistent with our global vision. And that for us is one of the ways that, you know, we're doing things differently, is engaging directly with young people, because we learn so much. And the volunteers that participate in this program, I hear this all the time. They go, I thought we were supposed to be teaching them, but I learned so much. And I went, exactly. And in turn, therefore, we can turn around and support the brands that we have, like I said, the honor of representing more authentically in terms of what is this generation looking for? What is a way of connecting with them authentically and them correctly? Because that's a duty of care that we have, both to young people and to the brands and to the world. It's that perfect triangle. Kian, it makes me think, you mentioned the 150 young change makers that you work with. Can you share some sort of insights of what you've learned through working with them, and what their expectations are from brands?
Yeah, of course, Scott. I think I have to acknowledge that I'm very lucky. Just the fact that I get to work and interact with these change makers and these activists from all around the world is amazing and makes me excited every day to just wake up and start. And for the last 6 months, we've been working with activists from all around the globe. So from Karen from Brazil, who's a cosplayer, but she's also fighting for green energy and vegan lifestyles in Brazil, to Katana in South Africa, who's advocating for indigenous rights and the rights of local communities, to Normel from Philippines, who's part of the Fridays for Future chapter in the Philippines. And I think what's been amazing is beyond the theory and beyond like the kind of academic stuff, just hearing their lived experiences and how they are fighting every day on the front lines. And from the last 6 months, I would say, especially when thinking about AdNet Zero and this great platform, there's been 3 key, what I would call macro themes, because as you can imagine, when you look at all around the world, there's different cultures, there's different unique challenges, but the ones we've seen so far is, the first one is this real appetite and this real ground up approach to consumer rebellion. So a lot of the young people in our community, they are no longer activists in the same way activism was 30, 40, 50 years ago, where they're trying to change the system or handcuff themselves to a tree. It might still be the case, but in the majority of the cases we're seeing is activism through the choices that they make every day. So whether that's the brands they choose to advocate, the products they choose to buy, and the reflection of that for brands is, how can you equip this new generation of activists? How can you give them the right tools to advocate your sustainable brand instead of the competitors? So that's definitely the first one. And then the other one that's really important is the need for brands to own up. And what I mean by that is being very honest. They don't buy comms alone. So it's about a lot of the conversations we've had, they've just been very honest and said corporations need to take responsibility. They can't shift the blame to the end consumer, because ultimately 71% of all carbon emissions comes from 100 companies. And the message we're getting all the time is it's not about being perfect. You don't need to be perfect. Everyone's on a journey, both as individuals, but also as a company. But it's about, before you start messaging and creating these communications, owning up to what you're doing at the moment. So that's the first step in the journey. And the last one I would say from the work we've done with activists, Scott, is the need for social activism. Sadly, I think the environmental crisis and challenge has been decoupled from the social challenges facing people all around the world. And I don't think you can separate those things. You can't achieve climate action and climate justice if the majority of the world's population doesn't have access to education, doesn't have access to opportunities, to electricity, to food. So it's addressing the social inequities that are ingrained in our economy, and also listening to the voices of activists from all around the world. And this is something you mentioned, James, in the Code Presents talk, of not just this kind of narrow Eurocentric approach, but how can you hear from voices from all around the world?
Absolutely, Kian. And actually, I couldn't agree any more violently with all three of those points. But I think I suppose the next question I've got really is focused on that second point you made about brands and actually owning this issue. So I think to you, Scott, how can brands authentically engage in this era that's sometimes perceived as greenwashing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, the era of greenwashing is fading, thankfully. Variety of factors there. And actually, we want to be at the forefront of that change. I think the three of us personally, but dentsu as a whole and the people as well. Yeah. Because, we're seeing things like legislation change from the CMA, so the Competition and Markets Authority, putting in like anti-greenwashing laws where they will actually be fined or ads will be pulled. This is what we need to see, is the legislation to back up the consumer awareness. And consumer awareness is also increasing day by day. The gap where greenwashing can take place is diminishing. It's the gap that's sort of the unawareness, because people genuinely want to help society. They genuinely want to help the environment. And that gap is what we need to help them close, is that knowledge gap of realizing what's real and what isn't. But also we're seeing an intolerance of brands who are not consistent and transparent in their approach. So we did some thought leadership recently and some research globally, looking at about 60,000 consumers. And it showed that between now and 2030, consumers will see brand inaction on climate and inequality to be on par with criminal negligence. It will simply not be allowed to happen. Also, 2 out of 3 consumers will not buy products with a perceived negative environmental impact. And we see this even in really loyal sectors like beauty, which is quite surprising, but also a really important flag. But now recently out of COP, we've seen Rishi Sunak announce this sort of gold standard verification scheme as a safeguard against corporate greenwashing. So that was put together with industry representatives, academics, regulations, and civil society, which means that businesses will need to report climate risk-related information to align with TFCD, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and soon, from April 2022. So it's not something that we're going to be able to, tolerate any longer. And for me, we're talking about doing things differently. For me, it always is going to come down to accreditation and transparency. That's how you do things properly, because otherwise, why bother? So recently, we shared that we are now one of only 7 companies globally with the highest level of climate ambition. So it's called the Science-Based Targets Net Zero Standard. I mean, like 1 out of 7. Like I want to hug the whole team for that, and just share so much gratitude for that level. But it's because in no uncertain terms, the IPCC report literally says code red for humanity. It says that deep decarbonization of our entire value chain is the only way that you can actually claim real net zero. And then, Kian, you mentioned something about indigenous people, and it made me think. We also seen this global pledge at COP26 to end deforestation by 2030. And I think that trees and planting trees is often a tempting lowest point of entry for many corporates. Just want to offset things to keep up business as usual. But I must implore anyone that's listening to reduce emissions first, decarbonize first, and rely only cautiously on offsets, because the cost of credible carbon offsets will quickly increase. And so we need to challenge every supplier and every partner we work with to raise their level of climate ambition year on year. Of course, trees are vital, but that's the point, is regeneration of forests needs to be done through the lens of biodiversity, but also in community with indigenous people. Because what I love is indigenous people are only 5% of the global population, but they protect 80% of the world's biodiversity. Thanks to National Geographic for that stat. But that's, and James, just to close this out, why would anyone want to greenwash? It's cheating us out of a safe, habitable, healthy planet, causing suffering for millions of people, and losing out on a chance to make real meaningful progress and a legacy that we can all be proud of. And the pandemic has shown us that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And if we don't learn that lesson, we're going to be forced to learn it again. Anyway, that's my little activism rant.
Wow. I think that's really powerful, Scott. And especially the point around tangible ways to create action, because sometimes it's really tough. You want to make something happen and you want to make a difference, but sometimes you don't know where to start. So those examples that you've given, Scott, are great. And then staying on the subject of how do you take action, James, I suppose the question I've got for you, given the work you do in the world of creative, is what is the gap between intention and action with brands who want to deliver on social purpose through creative work?
Well, that's quite a huge question. I think I'm going to continue on Scott's theme of we've all got to own this issue. I think part of the challenge sometimes is can be the know-how. You know, as Scott was talking to, it's great to hear Scott talk. He's so knowledgeable in this space to actually know what to do in this space. But I think just as important is to own the issue and to actually be proactive and find out about this stuff. And I think that is the same. You know, we all need to own the agenda for creating a more sustainable world and doing societal good. And whether you're a brand, you're an agency, or us as individuals, I think it's equally important. I think coming back very specifically to your question, Kian, that brands are engaging in social purpose, probably more and more, but always have engaged in social purpose in some shapes or form. And, you know, we work with, other than those I've mentioned before, but the likes of Procter & Gamble that have a very focused strategy around social purpose and social good. And even brands that you probably wouldn't think so much, like Oreos, have got very clear plans in this space. And so, you know, that presents us as creatives and agencies with an amazing platform to do campaigns. And I won't use this as an opportunity to promote some of our work, but if anybody is interested, we've created some quite powerful campaigns for both those brands in this space. But, you know, in talking, you know, to kind of bring this down to a level of being more concrete. You know, brands can play a huge role in social change, and one that we're working with now in the UK, Kraft Heinz. I mean, obviously a huge FMCG brand. You know, we've created a new creative, if you like, communications platform called Beans Means More, and on a level you can start to work out what that means. But as a business, they're moving to being a plant-based business. I mean, obviously beans have always been made of lentils, but the overall business is very focused on being a plant-based business. And our most recent advertisement and work for them started, you know, with the ambition to show how I think most people default to beans, especially in the UK, of the beans on toast. That's the classic. But also we use the ad to showcase how beans can mean more, and actually how it can be made into burgers. So you're using lentils as burgers instead of meat, how it can be made into curries or various different dishes. Obviously, we showcase this in a very light, you know, advertisement, but it creates a meaning for what beans means more. And I think we're using that as a platform to push more societal positive change as well. So, you know, we're wanting to make it accessible to everyone. I mean, a can of beans is accessible to most people. It doesn't cost pounds; it costs pence. And And one of the big campaigns that are coming really is about magic breakfasts, where we're working with schools and a major supermarket retailer to actually bring breakfast to kids in holidays and at weekends when they don't get their free school meal. So we're delivering them through the post. So those kids, are not suffering from food poverty and the times when they're not at school. So, there's lots more that I could continue on, but you can see how a huge brand like Kraft Heinz, with an iconic product like Heinz beans can actually do work positively in the space of sustainability in plant-based foods, but also in a social good sense. And actually this all being at the same time part of a communications campaign that works positively for the brand in making sure that people stay aware of the brand, so it's a continued choice for consumers, but it's also a positive choice that you can choose to buy beans because it's plant-based, it's positive for sustainability, but it's also doing some societal good.
I think those are exactly the kind of campaigns that motivate our people too.
Isn't it, Scott? And I kind of, and you think about the code, and these are the sort of challenges that we did. These are the sort of communications challenges that you want to set to young creatives that are coming into our world. That actually we can do positive in the world, which is a very neat segue to the next section we wanted to talk about, which is very specific to COP26, and we've been working on a project called Daydream Believers as dentsu. So our friends and colleagues in our white space agency, an isobar company in Edinburgh, have been, and Chris Davey, our head of creative, and the team up there are one of the founders of this initiative. So this wasn't a brief or a brand that we were working with. This is actually a project that we wanted to invest in as dentsu, and the initiative is called #GetOnWithIt. And really what we were trying to do really was to use creativity to drive positive societal change and a move to a sustainable world. And obviously the hint in the title of Get On With It is to actually to speak to people in power, governments, institutions, businesses, bodies, to actually get on with creating a sustainable world. Stop doing things that are not positive to that change. So we've worked with schools as part of this initiative. With partners including Pesha Kucha, with Lego, with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So some great partners to do, but with schools and Strathclyde University in Scotland, to give them, as our role was to provide the creativity, a toolkit for teachers and for the schools to come up with ideas to challenge people in power with how we can get on with it, how we can make positive, sustainable change. And I think this is an investment in both talent and in training, and it's really in our belief in creativity and how it can change the world. And also for us, as Scott mentioned, we are one of the world's largest advertising and communications groups, and and it's really important to us that we can use our capabilities and our creativity to work with young people, kids, schools, students, universities, schools, and institutions to try and get them not just to help them in their own creativity and their own missions, but to actually do positive good in society. So I think in terms of the intro, you kind of had a little bit of a hint at the start in Kian's biog about some of the amazing work that he's been doing in this space. So I'd love to hear from you, Kian, in terms of some of the work and the brands that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely, James. I think I was just reflecting on the diverse range of work that's being created in dentsu, and especially I think the beans example of the advert, but the extension of it into real world is an amazing example. I think for us, we've, in the spirit of doing things differently, our definition of case studies is completely different. So our mission is to unleash the creative potential of young people. And there are some great work that we're doing with brands. And I love some of the work that's being done externally, like the likes of, definitely one of my favorite brands is Ben & Jerry's. I love the product, but I also love their mission. And I think what sets them apart is the fact that they stand for something. And when you stand for something so strong, it's a principle. And sometimes principles come at a cost. So you have to be very kind of assured in your brand and who your audience is. So that's kind of the external world. And then internally, we've been lucky enough to work with some of the best and most ambitious brands in the world. And one of my favorite examples is we've partnered up with a challenger drinks brand. So it's an alcohol-free beer brand called Freestar. And the purpose of it is we've set up the hotline, which is a mentoring program, which has supported over 170 young people through mentoring, CV advice. And the whole premise is around supporting the next generation, whether that's next generation drinking or next generation work and creative, which is the work we do. And the reason I said changing the definition of case studies and examples, I think Scott talked about it at the outset of the transition with the codes, but increasingly young people are at the front line of change, and what they're doing has the power to change the world. So I think flipping the equation by, rather than starting with companies and brands, it's like the question we always ask ourselves is how can these companies with all this resources and scale and expertise support young activists on the ground?
Yeah. And those people will be most affected by the climate change that we have caused in previous generations. And I realized that we've had so much fun talking that we've run out of time. But I really wanted to finish just with the challenge to any brands or people that represent brands, because now is the time to decide if you're going to be a leader or a laggard. We can chuck money into PR, or we can actually invest it properly into the necessary transformation to a net zero, restorative, circular economy. It's coming to every sector, and really now is the time, because the word sustainable that we've used a lot has no set meaning. It's often defined as meeting current needs without compromising future needs. But I would challenge you to look beyond just compromising, being net positive, being regenerative, being inclusive, being a force for good, because it will make your business better. That's it. That's what we all want. We want to thrive. We want the world to thrive. We want each other to thrive. And let's do it together, because now is the time for collaboration.